Welcome to the After Dinner Leadership Podcast. For this episode, we thought it would be a really good opportunity at the turn of the year to take a look at the 2023 episodes that we've enjoyed, and also then to take a quick look at 2024 and what we've got in store. I've brought Ryan Spoors, my colleague, from behind the microphone or behind the scenes. He's produced all of the episodes in 2023, along with one of our other colleagues, Chloe. And so he's not been involved in the conversations actively, but has heard everyone and gone through them line by line in the editing process. So, Ryan, it's really good to have you back. You've been a co-host on some of the previous seasons of the show. It's nice to have you back with us.
Yeah, it's great. It's been a wonderful year. Lots of learnings and lots of real good application. Actually, it's been really insightful. Even if I do listen to it more than everybody else 100 different times, but it's good.
Great. We've had 20 guests in 2023. Only 4 of them this year have been people I've met before. So it's been a really great opportunity to meet new people, to learn from different corners of the world and different perspectives that we've come across, and we'll examine some of that later. But it's always really nice to have more detailed conversations with some people that I've worked with or have known for many years as well, and maybe look into some of the corners of their life that we've not had a full discussion on before as well. But one of the amazing thing is, as we've prepared for today, is I cannot believe that Andrea Pascini was the first episode in 2023. That feels like it was only a few months ago, not a year ago. And it's incredible how quick the year's gone. Just, again, going through the guests and thinking about what we learned from them. It's been amazing how they've positively impacted my life and getting their information and kind of challenging some of my own perspectives on some of the topics. Has been really rich. What's been a reflection at a high level for you, Ryan, as you've prepared for tonight's conversation?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that for me, around communication, there's lots of different aspects, but we've had lots of guests come on and talk around the way that we communicate, whether that's through the way that we speak or the way that we listen. Lots of different themes that have come kind of branches off of the main communication tree almost. And that's been a real takeaway for me, just to think, every time I open my mouth, I let the world know a little bit about who I am, almost. That type of learning as well. So it's been very insightful, actually.
Great. Well, let's get into some of the highlights, shall we? And I know that you've had a particular show that stood out for you this year. What was? And I've gone more along the line of some themes that have stood out. So what was one of the episodes that has really resonated with you this year in 2023?
Yeah, for me, like you said, I've chosen one, but there are definitely lots that you kind of listen to that and you think that was great, or that was just what I needed to hear for whatever's happening at the different time in my life. But as an aspiring leader, kind of in my early 20s, lots of conversations have been very enriching, and I'm grateful for all the guests kind of adapting and communicating in a way that me as a younger, kind of starting off in my career can listen and understand. But one that really stuck with me, and again, just in preparing for tonight's show, the one with Andy Brown, I think it was episode 61, that looked around aligning with our values. Yeah, was really great. Well, the 3 leadership lessons that he shared were very insightful, but then just the conversation as well, for me, I just felt myself like, this is really good for me right now. He mentioned around how to find your own values, and I think that was something for me that kind of was like, right, I want to establish my own set of values that kind of govern my action and my decision making process, and kind of challenge that a little bit, just to think, actually, what are my deep values that kind of govern the way that I live my life, and kind of stating them and bringing them into my consciousness more.
Yeah, excellent. I'm really pleased it had that impact, and Andy's a good friend, and I know that he's someone that does live by his values as well. So that's a very powerful lesson there. What happened as a consequence of that? Have you gone through the exercise of refining that?
Yeah, he shared some work from Hiram Smith. I can't remember the book, that he shared it from. Don't know if you
Things
can
which
remember
matter
either of that.
most, or what matters most, I think it's called.
That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah, that's
yeah,
right. And kind of this idea that like when everything else is stripped away, what is it that you go to battle for? And that kind of got me thinking around, family or my faith or whatever it might be. But that kind of changed for me. I did that exercise. I wrote down just 5 things. I'd have to find them here now, but kind of just, if everything else, all the noise, all the stuff, all the even social trends, for example, I've found that for myself. It's like if something's in a social trend, sometimes I can hold on to that and I think, oh, that's really valuable. But then if it was all stripped away, would I go into battle for that? Is that one of my inner values, or is that a really helpful and interesting thing to know? Or is that one of actually my deep values, which can be the
yeah,
case too?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a powerful exercise. It's come up a lot. I guess one of the themes that I picked up from this year was, I guess I'm looking for this quite a lot, but this idea of purpose.
Mm.
And a few of our guests were helping to talk about different angles of that. So Andy was one of those around
Yeah.
the values piece, but quite recently, Gerardo was talking a lot about life changes that he'd made and uh, living more according to your why, and some of the truths that he's found that help him to govern his behavior was really powerful. And then Mark Lesser, I think episode 50, wasn't it? He was looking at clarity and really digging into um, change, personal change, and thinking about your purpose around that. So the kind of whole self-awareness in the process of finding your purpose was fascinating. There's a few guests that touch on that, and we talk a lot about it with our clients. So it always resonates with me. But I was really grateful for the perspectives of that, and particularly I think Mark's point. He come from more meditation and a kind of a Zen thinking, and brought that across the bridge into corporate life. And there were some really helpful things in his book that I found caused us to reflect. And I think as a team, actually, we used some of the questions he'd asked as one of our team meetings as a way of finding out a little bit more about each other, which was really useful too.
I think it's been really helpful, and I like what you mentioned around like the purpose behind it. And I know that Andy mentioned around, Simon Sinek's work with start with why. And I think it's becoming more of a thing that people are actually asking that question, why? What's the purpose behind doing this thing, rather than just focusing on what it is that we're doing. Again, I think especially at critical stages of your life, being like my age being one of them, kind of starting off in your career, or like you mentioned, Mark mentioned around change and navigating different kind of periods of your life, Gerardo also. But it's like, are we asking that question? What's the why behind this? What's the purpose behind doing this, rather than just getting caught up in all those different things that we've got to do and the what's, but actually spending more time in the whys over the what's and the hows.
Yeah, and you mentioned change, and one of the episodes early on in February of the year, episode 46, we got to meet with Elizabeth Moran, and she has written a book called Forward. And I was just, it was really interesting, that one, on a reflection, how quickly we seem to connect on that one. We'd not met before. It was a really lovely conversation, as I enjoy all the conversations I have, but and she particularly zoomed in on change. But one of the things I loved about what she'd written is how practical it was. It was almost like, really, like, this is the kind of conversation you could have with somebody, and these are the words that you could use if they fit your vocabulary. These are some of the words that you could use to have some of these more challenging conversations when people are going through organizational change. And because a lot of the work I've been doing with clients is in that space, it was really helpful to overlay her work with the kind of work that I'm doing. And one of the phrases that I loved in her learnings was around decoupling my sense of value from the reactions to the output. In other words, like, someone may not like the change I'm presenting, and I could easily take that personally. I could easily think, well, they don't like me, or this is a bad idea because someone's reacting negatively to it. And neither of those reactions are necessarily true. And there was a really good piece there that we discussed around that, and which I really enjoyed. It's helped me personally, with our own business, but also working with clients, just to remind them of that. And so I found that really useful. It was particularly resonant at the time, but I found that throughout the year, reflecting back on her work, and our conversation has come up a lot, which is great.
Yeah, I remember you sharing how profound her work was. You'd read her book, and sharing a lot of those learnings with me that I was grateful for.
Yeah,
so that's good. Yeah.
And then the other topic, the other theme that's come out quite a few times this year, I guess it started when we were talking about presenting kind of various aspects of presentation skills with Andrea in January. So his was around how to present great ideas and help them to be successful. But then towards the tail end of the year, we've had a bit of a theme around story and storytelling as well, which we've covered in previous years as well. But like with Simon Lancaster and David Pullen, both of them were great at helping us to understand the important role that story plays, but also how to construct great rhetorical elements within the story that you're telling, and just the process by which you can put a story together, which was really useful. What did you take from the storytelling episodes yourself, Ryan?
Yeah, I thought a lot about how stories do engage me as a listener. You know, I've not done much presenting on a stage or whatever it might be, but I've listened to a lot of different things, and I know that, you know, the story and kind of clicking it on, and I know that feeling that comes when the lights go on and you realize the power of the story that they used at the beginning, and how, because they shared that story at the beginning, they've been able to convey the message depth and power in my mind. And I know that feeling. It's a difficult one to describe, isn't it? But it's like like if you can understand what that feeling is, that noise, but I took that away. You know, it's like recognizing different stories and how every individual actually has their own story. And I think you mentioned it. I think Richard shared it, or something. I can't remember, but he mentioned around sharing your scars, not your wounds.
Yeah.
And I was thinking around, we've all got different stories, and we can leverage those and use those to create and influence and inspire other people, but choosing what we share in a way that's both vulnerable and useful, but in a way that's kind of inspiring and holds true to the message that you're trying to tell, rather than just using a story for the sake of it, but really having meaning behind the stories that we're using.
Yeah, the scars not wounds is a very powerful metaphor, and I've used it a lot in my own reflections, but also again when I've been talking to leaders about how they could share messages with their colleagues. It's a really interesting analogy, and I went inward first of all when I heard that, thinking about some of the challenging life experiences that I've had, and when I'm telling the stories about them, where am I focusing? Where's the energy go? And I think there has been times where I've gone down the wounds route, and not to good effect. It might have felt quite therapeutic to kind of vent this thing that I hadn't properly dealt with, but on reflection, wasn't the most helpful thing to share with the group. The core story itself was, but needed to take it from a perspective of scars, and I found that to be really useful as a bit of a filter to be open, to be vulnerable about the things that have happened, but to talk about the learning from it rather than just the kind of the rawness of it, or the hurt that's still there, in terms of being inspiring to others.
I was reminded also, it jogs my memory, but just like the importance of writing down those stories when they happen too. It came off the conversation that you shared about your daughter, and she kind of felt like she was there in part of the story, but it was kind of the way that we remember stories can kind of miscue the actual origin of the story almost. And that's something I took away from that episode, was just, actually, am I writing down these experiences and these stories so that when I use them, they're real? And that, you know, and not just writing down what happened, but again, looking a little bit deeper and what are some of the learnings that I'm taking from it right now. And then you can compare that to when you're looking back in hindsight in 5-10 years time, the learnings you can take from that as well. So story has real power. It's great.
Yeah, it does. And I'm grateful for the stories that we've heard throughout the year. We've just picked out a few there, but they've been a real benefit to me. And one of the, just to finish on one last piece in terms of a highlight, I always enjoy catching up with old friends again. That all of our guests, have left a real positive impact on me this year. It was really interesting to ask my friend Colin Stewart to come. So this was episode 51, back in April. Again, hard to believe that was back in April.
Crazy.
But we've known each other for years, and we've had lots of in-depth conversations about different things, but never really spoken about his leadership journey and what are some of the things that's driven him and those kind of things. And so it was really lovely to have one of my really good friends who's been really successful in many aspects of his life, but just to unpick that a little bit more than we would have if we were going out to dinner with each other or just meeting up to play some sport. And so it was great to delve into some of the areas of his life and just I guess there was some elements of newness about it, but just for him to reflect on his experiences and share those with us, I think was really useful as a leader, and for me to learn a little bit more about him through that way was great. I mean, one of the things that he mentioned was that don't try to be an expert at everything, as an example, and be more comfortable in your own skin. And I think it's interesting how often that has come out this year, not just in the podcast episodes, but as I've been speaking to people, as we've had guest speakers attend some of our development programs that we're running for clients, that has been something that's come out in either one-to-one conversations with them or that they've shared with the groups about their careers. I've really been interested to hear that come through quite a lot. Don't try to be the expert at everything. You need to let go, and you need to be a bit more comfortable in the not knowing, which is great. But Colin's a great friend, and really grateful for him joining, and how I was able to learn even more from him again.
Yeah, it taps into a kind of a theme that's kind of happened throughout the year. You see it a lot on LinkedIn and stuff, but like this idea of being vulnerable and showing vulnerability. I guess it taps into the story piece as well, but being vulnerable, that's kind of the action side of being vulnerable, right? Is being comfortable in your own skin and being confident in what you have. I know that, like, again, Andy Brown, his first leadership lesson to everyone was to trust yourself and trust your own insights. And that I think ties in nicely to kind of being confident and stepping into spaces, being purposeful and being aware of what you have to offer. It's good.
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to 2024. We've got a great number of guests already lined up. And again, several of those are people that I know very well. And so I'm looking forward to dipping into conversations with them. And this idea of purpose as well. I think one of the themes that emerges for me is around having purpose and then being able to stay on purpose. So kind of a personal quest for me this year is to live even closer to the things that I've determined as strategic in aims, or that are true, even truer to the core values that I aspire to. And that a lot of that is about removing distractions and being aware of what those distractions are. And I'm in the process of doing that already over the last few months, kind of trying to change gears, which has been really helpful in being more purposeful. But looking forward to going into 2024 of that staying on purpose, not just having purpose, but being able to stay even more on purpose. So I'm optimistic about that, and looking forward to the learnings that will come with that kind of extra discipline in those areas, to see what we can continue to create on the podcast, but in wider life as well. What are you looking forward to in 2024?
It's along a similar vein, actually. I think a big thing for me is around being purposeful in learning as well, and absorbing information and things. And I recognized I've heard a few people speak about it, including on the podcast, but like having almost like a board of directors that share different opinions. And I've recognized that a lot of the content and the media that I consume is helping me to think one way, but just to kind of learn different perspective, different ways of doing things that normally I'm just comfortable doing. So I kind of I'm hopeful and optimistic around the learnings that I can initiate in 2024 by being proactive in seeking opportunities to grow and learn, with that kind of the purposeful nature there being kind of the bedrock of that. So going about that with purpose.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, we've had wonderful guests in 2023. If there's any of the episodes that we've mentioned that you haven't listened to this year, and hopefully what our conversation has just opened up the doorway to those again, please take a look, take a listen. We shifted to video halfway through the year as well, so you can take a look on YouTube as well as listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and the likes. And the good news is, as we move into 2024, that we're looking to do a weekly episode. So we'll have a longer interview style that we've got already, and then we'll do some shorter bite-sized chunks, just some shorter reflections on what's going on in the world and of leadership, and also previous episodes, kind of resurfacing some of the core content that we have in the library is something we're looking forward to. So more work in terms of getting that out, Ryan, for you and the team, but I think that hopefully will improve the connection we have with our audience.
Absolutely.
So thank you for listening. We trust that this has been a useful reminder of some of the conversations that we've had throughout the year, and we invite you to join us and to invite others to join us in 2024 for more insight and more discovery from leaders from all across the world, all different roles. And we look forward to continuing to share great content, great conversations with you that you can enjoy after your dinner. And we look forward to connecting. Please send us a note, a message if you have guests that you would recommend. We welcome any invitations, and we like getting to know new people and people that you think would suit this format, be willing to speak to us about their leadership journey and their experience. All welcome. Thank you very much, and have a very successful 2024.
Happy New Year.